Sure, let's read this. Schopenhauer on suicide. What does Schopenhauer have to say on suicide? Wow, this is a long thing, eh? Blasman says, fun. Well, I don't know if it's gonna be fun. Interesting, perhaps. Actually, I just want to double check here. Chopin. It was the dude with the... You just need some context here. I forget. What did he do? The world as will and representation. A nominal world as a product of a blind and insatiable nominal will. Building on the transcendental idealism of Kant. Yeah, I haven't read Schopenhauer. Not enough. I think he means Abrahamic religions. He is a pessimist like me. Alright, pessimism. I'm assuming the philosophy, which I can't put my finger on right now, but it's not like the common usage of the term. Like just... Yeah, there are two different types of pessimism. Philosophical pessimism, which makes sense if I recall. Alright, let's see. Actually, what we do then is that we turn that off and we start some of this. Oh, I need to log in? Damn it. Alright, it's fine. Let's listen to Path of Exile music. It's gonna take too much time logging in and then logging in and then... Path of Exile music is just fine. Alright, as far as I can see, it is only the followers of monotheistic, that is, Jewish religions, Abrahamic. Yeah. I mean, we call them Abrahamic nowadays. It kind of makes sense, though. Like, both... Yeah, all the Abrahamic comes from Jewish from the start, right? That is, Jewish religions that regard suicide as a crime. Is that... Monotheistic religions. Alright. We have to take this in context, right? Church and state was way more intertwined, right? So... Yeah, so church and state was intertwined, so seeing it as a crime makes sense, right? Crime slash sin, right? They see it as a sin. Having it being a crime is just dumb, right? Lasmus says, I think he did a good job on this. I would assume that all of these essays he did a good job on, right? It's a name, right? If you study philosophy, you've heard the name. So I'm just assuming that there is value to what he writes. That's an assumption on my part. The canon assumption, ooh, that's not the greatest assumption to make, I suppose. All right. This is the more striking, as there is no forbiddance of it, or even positive disapproval of it, to be found in either the New Testament or the Old, so that teachers of religion have to base their disapprobation? Alright, the illegality of the thing, the disallowance of the thing, right? They base their disappropriation of suicide on their own philosophical grounds. Exactly. Well, emotional and philosophical. Yeah, I guess both. These, however, are so bad that they try to compensate for the weakness of their arguments by strongly expressing their abhorrence of the act. That is to say, by abusing it. Wait, abusing what? All right. They are so bad that they try to compensate for the weakness of their arguments by strongly expressing their abhorrence of the fact. That is to say, by abusing it. What is he referring to here? There are abhorrence, the act, abusing their own emotions. This it can be like, Blasphemous. Don't automatically put value just because someone is famous. Exactly, right? That's the problem with canon. Just because a lot of people think something doesn't make it a good idea. It just did that assumption, right? Schopenhauer, because I heard the name, I thought it was gonna be good, right? I noted it myself that that's not the way to do stuff. Alright, continue and you will see. Alright. I'm not sure I completely agree with the sentiment that he is expressing here. Just pointing that out, that I'm not convinced by this. That right, he says that it's philosophical grounds. I mean, it depends, right? What do we specifically talk about? If we talk about it as a crime, then I'm on his side, right? Specifically, like if someone tries to commit suicide, and then we talked about prisons before, and I kind of want to abolish prisons altogether, but let's just keep reading, I suppose. We are told that suicide is an act of the greatest cowardice. That's a bit extreme. But I suppose, yeah. That it is only possible to a madman and other absurdities of a similar nature. Or they make use of the perfectly senseless expression that it is wrong. I like this dude. Wrong. He knows. While it is perfectly clear that no one has such indisputable right over anything in the world as over his own personal life. That's my favorite, right? That's my favorite. The wrong thing. Blasphemous. Nowadays, some people take what social media celebrities says as valuable. Yeah, it's a mistake, right? It's a mistake either way. Taking it as not valuable or valuable. Either way, it doesn't, like, the words should stand by themselves. I'm all for that, but I'm also understanding that you use, like, celebrity, right? You use ethos to listen to someone's words, right? Schopenhauer, just by nature of being a famous philosopher, makes me read this, right? If it was me who wrote this, not like the words should stand on themselves, but just to actually read the words, to get to the point to read the words, you use the celebrity as a filter, right? It's pros and cons. Yeah, pros and cons to that. But that is how it works. Blasphemous says, people assume that if you want to die, you must be mad, right? That is what he's saying, yes. And I can see a lot of people making those assumptions, right? Right? Some people claim it to be cowardice. Which, I mean, I suppose it depends on how you look at it. I could see that argument being an argument, right? That suicide is an act of cowardice. I don't know about greatest, but it's depending on how you define cowardice. To quote from Robert Jordan, or paraphrase, I don't remember. To live is a mountain. to die is a feather. Right? When you're dead, you're dead. It's over, right? There's no more else to do. But I don't know. I could see this. I would probably not agree to it. Yeah, I would probably not agree to it, but I can see the argument, and I would not discard this argument. However, I mean, this feels like begging the question. Come on, Skywalker. Right? That it's only possible to a madman. Well, in the part of the definition of a madman is that they do stuff like this, right? It seems like it's probably a circular definition to say that it's the work of a madman. Like, only a madman does serial killings, therefore a serial killer is a madman. Right? It's circular. So this seems dumb, yeah, saying that it's only possible to a madman. It doesn't help to make that claim. It's just fancy rhetorics. Yeah, this is just fancy rhetorics in my mind. Yeah, I don't like that assumption. If you want to die, you must be a madman. I don't like that. I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of people to want to die. I've claimed that before, right? If I end up getting the cancer of the worst case, right? And I know for a fact that, well, the next year is going to be suffering and then I'm going to die. Then I would probably prefer to die before that year was over, right? I don't see that as a madman, so like... Actually, I don't even like that term, madman. Mad Max? And other absurdities of similar nature. So one of them, I agree, was an absurdity, the other, not so much. Right, or they make us use the perfectly senseless expression that it is wrong. Yeah, use that guillotine. Well, it is perfectly clear that no one has such indisputable right over anything in the world as over his own person and life. I would, like, a modern way to say that is that we have agency, right? We act as if we have agency, that I am in control of my life and my person, which is, right, yeah. Alright, Blasphemous. I put Schopenhauer's words above Nietzsche's, even though I relate to Nietzsche's life more. Because of the words, not because of Schopenhauer or Nietzsche. It's because of the words, right, Blasphemous? Right. The name is just... who wrote the words. It's fine to give credit where credit is due, but the words are not above Nietzsche's because it was he who wrote them. It's because you enjoy these words more than Nietzsche's words. Right? I suppose. Blasphemous also says, how many people have you met that believe you must be crazy if you wish you die? I mean, I haven't talked about suicide to a lot of people, but the people I have talked about, like, probably none. I could assume that a lot of people that I have met that I have not talked about suicide with, that they think that you're crazy, right? That's an assumption of my part that I can assume that of people that I met. But I would take... my guess would be statistically probably a fairly high number of people think you must be crazy to want to commit suicide, right? Because not everybody contemplate, right? Not everybody contemplates suicide. Like, a lot of people don't contemplate suicide, and it's way outside their Overton window, right? It's way outside their Overton window. The frame of discourse, window of discourse, right? And usually that is what people think, right? If somebody contemplates something that is outside of their Overton window, they see it as crazy, right? And since society has such a big stigma on suicide, that makes a lot of sense to me. That for some people, like just contemplating suicide is not, for them, it's not even conceivable, right? And therefore they think it's crazy. So that would make a lot of sense to me that, yeah, the majority of people, I'm gonna pull this stat out of my ass, 80% of people think it's just crazy. Even though they might not put it in those harsh terms, they might put it in, yeah, inconceivable. They see it as inconceivable. Blasphemous continued, it is extremely rare for someone to take into consideration that you might have a legit sane reasons. Yeah. My guess is for 80%. So extremely rare. I wouldn't say go that far, no. But like that's just wild guessing. Wild guessing. Cat lol? Yeah. He just left. Let's not use diseases as an example for wishing to die. That is obvious. Yeah. Why not use the obvious example, right? If someone's overton window is like so far removed from that, why not use the obvious example for those people, right? For those people who think it's crazy. Why not use the obvious example? Right? Then you have shown, like, your logic does not make sense. We have a specific example that convinces you immediately that, oh, I can see why someone would think that. Baby steps. Right? Baby steps indeed. That is... I think that's probably the best example, right? Why not? Because people are more open to that one. Yeah. Isn't that a reason to use that example? I don't understand how you're thinking now, Blasphemous. There are other ways that they will not listen to. Exactly. So what do you do by using that as an example? You extend the overton window. You move it closer, right? You make a chink into armor and you extend the overton window, right? If you try, if we say that there is a scale right here, I move it over here. You want to jump straight over here and people will not listen to that, right? So from my point of view, right, it depends, right? For me, it's just enough to say, the only thing I need to break this is to say, well, it doesn't take a madman. And since we have answered that question, right, we have opened the door for all the other many possible reasons that they might not listen to at first, but since they've listened to the first reason, then they have to concede, right? If they concede. If someone concedes that, oh, you've got a point, it does not take a madman. That statement was it doesn't work out. The madman statement doesn't work. And now we have a route in. It's like the foot in the door. The foot in the door strategy of salespeople, right? You've gotten the foot in the door. Right? They can no longer claim that it takes a madman. Since it clearly doesn't, if you convince people. So, yeah. I would definitely go for the obvious one first. If that is... And that is where my mind went as well, right? Because it's obvious. Alright. Suicide, as has been said, is computed a crime, rendering inevitable, especially in vulgar, bigoted England. Yep, it was a crime. It probably still is a crime, I think. Especially in vulgar, bigoted England. This is a rhetorical trick. Yeah, rhetorical trick. Fancy rhetorics. Wish people didn't do that to such an extent. It's like saying that stuff is wrong or only a madman would do something. Especially in vulgar, bigoted England. It's like, all of England is vulgar and bigoted? I don't know about that. That doesn't make sense to me. sounds like... Yeah, he's talking in extremes. Only a madman, especially in vulgar, bigoted England. Right. An ignominious... I don't know what that means. Ignominious burial. And the confiscation of property. Alright. They just throw you in a mass grave. I like it. It's like no proper burial and they take all your property. Shame. Shame on you. Alright. This is why the jury almost always brings in the verdict of insanity. Let one's own morals, feelings decide the matter for one. I didn't get this point. Alright. The jury almost like this, like I didn't live in England at that time, so I don't know what the verdict of insanity means here really. Let one's own moral feelings decide the matter for one. Compare the impression made upon one by the news that a friend has committed a crime, say murder, an act of cruelty or deception or theft, with the news that he had died a voluntary death. Yeah, they are completely different. Well, it is shocking news, right? I'm assuming, like, if any of my friends did any of these things, it would be shocking news. So they are similar in that they are shocking, and they are news that I did not wish to hear. So there are some similarities. But yeah. Some are worse than others, though, right? I think the two worst of these, the things that I really don't want to hear, is murder and suicide. Like, you did some cruel stuff. Oh, that sucks, man. You stole some stuff, or like, you made some crimes. I mean, that sucks. Especially that you got caught. But, right. Murder is like... I'm thinking like... Yeah, that sucks, dude. And voluntary death as well. Like, yeah, that's killing people. And this is worse, right? Because I lost a friend. Fuck you, friend. Yeah, I would get more angry at my friend because of this than any of the other things. The other things would be, unless it was they were cruel to me and stealing from me. The other things I wouldn't get angry about. Maybe the murder thing I would get angry about. But I would be more compassionate. With this, yeah, I would not be compassionate anymore. Like, sure, a bit of compassion. But it would be more guilt and anger. Guilt and anger and sadness. Roostercock says, I'll be going. Thanks for the stream. Until next time. Yeah, thanks for stopping by. Nice to see you. Have a good one, Roostercock. Yeah, and see you next time. Whilst news of the first kind will incite intense indignation. It's indignation, right? Heard that. I should know what that is. One of those words. Anger. The greatest displeasure and desire for punishment or revenge. Right? I just answered this question. He did not read me correctly. Yep. More indignation over the suicide, yeah? The greatest displeasure. Again with the greatest. Like, he's extreme. Yeah, displeasure with all of the things, yeah. Desire for punishment or revenge. All right, yeah. If they are being cruel to me, then sure, I would want revenge. Punishment is revenge. Like revenge and punishment goes hand in hand, right? What's with the or? I don't know about that. Blasphemuses. I sometimes wonder if people are like, what the fuck are these people talking about, Kappa? Wait, on suicide on this? I suppose, yeah. Alright. And desire for punishment or revenge. News of the second will move us to sorrow and compassion. I completely disagree. I completely disagree with this statement. Right? Just anecdotally, right? This is not what has happened to me. Right? I have had friends go to prison, and I did not feel the need for punishment or revenge. I felt sad for them. I felt sorrow and compassion for them. I've had friends who committed suicide, and I have felt, yes, sorrow and compassion, but also way more indignation. I haven't had any friends go to prison for murder, but I would imagine, right? Those are the two worst. Murder and suicide for the most indignation. Like, I can't speak for other people on this. I can speak for myself, and I can speak for what he says here. Right? I have to disregard this. Disregard, right? Blasphemuses. No in here, lol? I mean, some people probably have. Oh, yeah. I remember Coleman did that the other day. What the fuck are you talking about, he said. Yeah. He thought I was talking bullshit. And I think he had a point. I was tired and saying weird stuff. And I was kind of rude as well. I was not happy about that. Alright. Moreover, we will frequently have a feeling of admiration for his courage rather than one of moral disapproval. Just no. Nope. Talk for yourself. I will. He will. You will feel this way. And it's fine that you feel this way. This, I don't agree with this either. Yep. Which accompanies for his courage rather than one of moral disapproval, which accompanies a wicked act. Nope. I have moral disapproval over suicide. That's what you talked about. The abhorrence thing, right? What Schopenhauer was saying earlier, that is that people feel abhorrence towards it. Right? And moral disapproval. Now he's saying the opposite. He's saying that, oh, up here he's saying, oh, everybody's telling us and feeling this moral abhorrence, disapproval, whatnot. And down here he's saying that is not what you would feel. Right? He's disregarding all of these other people are saying, these 80% of people we were talking about. He's just disregarding it because he would not feel that way. So yeah, this whole bit, don't like it. Right. Who has not had acquaintances, friends, relatives who have voluntarily left this world? I don't know, was it more common before? I think most people that I know, well, since I know them and I've known, probably a lot of people, yeah. And are we to think of them with horror as criminals? No. Not at all. Ego ac per nego. I don't know what that means. Feels important. Can we get like a Latin translation? I kind of need, Blasphemuses. If you were born into a world where suicide was not... Just breathe. If you were born into a world where suicide was not so stigmatized, would you still have the same feelings towards it? I mean, I assume so, yes. Right? You killed one of my friends. Right? The guilt, right? I could have done something. Right? It's like grief. And I feel like... And that's like, we're talking about me personally, right? I'm not saying that everybody feels anger, but like I feel anger towards people who have died just because they have died. What if the world celebrated death? I mean, it is difficult, right? Right? The last funeral I was to, well, I'm thinking of my grandmother now when she died. We ended up, like, we went to the funeral and that sucked, and fucking churches. I fucking hate churches. Ugh. But then after, the closest family met and had a party, and we were just telling stories, celebrating. Yeah. I don't see, like... But that was celebrating life, right? Death being part of life, but we were celebrating a life lived. I'm not even sure I can, like this. It's very difficult to imagine a world where death was celebrated. A society, let's say not a world, a society where death was celebrated. Also, because my mind immediately goes to, well, if death was celebrated, then evolution would, like, kick that society out. Right? Because they would not stay around. Right? Like, if everybody became anti-natalist, the human race would kick the bucket, right? The only people who would stay alive would have been the people who did not buy into the anti-natalist ideas. So those ideas, by their very nature, cannot stick around. If we celebrate death and just want death, a society like that cannot be created. Cultures that celebrate death. I'm not so sure. I think they celebrate life. Yep. This is about celebrating life. I saw this movie. There was a movie about this thing. I learned about this thing from a cartoon. Maybe not. Alright. That is something else, like something else we can read. Like, the goal of life is not death. That is... Right? If I'm happy that people die, that would be like a religious thing, right? Alright, let's try this. Number 1, New Orleans. New Orleans jazz funeral. In New Orleans, Louisiana, one of the most famous traditions is the jazz funeral procession. Combining West African, French, African American traditions, these funerals merge the experiences and sentiment of grieving and celebration. As the funeral mourners... Right, so this one is not an example. Nagaben is a funeral ritual performed in Bali to send the deceased to the next life. During this Buddhist ceremony, right, that's not celebrating death, that's rebirth. Alright, Madagascar, turning of the bones. Famadihana is an important funeral tradition of the Malagasy people in Madagascar, also called turning of the bones. Every 5 to 7 years, people remove the bodies of their ancestors from their family crypts and rewrap them in fresh cloth. This is again assuming not a disappearance, right? They are remembering and bringing them back to life. Ghana fantasy coffins. In Ghana, people are often buried in highly decorated coffins that celebrate their passions in life. Still celebrating life. The Adamurtus, Day of the Dead. Sick. Alright. It's a holiday that dates back to the Aztec Empire. Over time, it has blended with the Catholic holiday, All Souls Day, to become a vibrant celebration of the dead. Here we go. Celebration of the dead. So the memory of the dead? Let's continue. On this holiday, family and friends gather to pray for and remember those who have died, and to help support their spiritual journey in their afterlife. Right? There is an assumption that they still exist. It's a celebration of the afterlife, not of death. Right? It's not that rest in peace, like rest in peace. That is something, celebrate death, right? Rest in peace. Now you're dead and gone and you don't have to live in this goddamn place anymore, right? And I can see that, right? That as you don't have to suffer anymore. That is like a type of celebration that can be part of it, but it's still, I don't see these as examples. Like, I would, like, if I grew up and was lived in these cultures, right? I would have a different view. Of course, I would. Like if I grew up in the Middle East, I would probably be a Muslim, right? Because our context creates us, right? I would probably be a Muslim. Maybe I would have even been, what's that called? Rabbi are the Jewish, priests are the Christians. What are they called? Imami? No. It wouldn't surprise me at all if I became like a religious, working in the mosque and whatnot. If I grew up in a place like that. Blasphemous says, I'm not upset when people decide to die. I am upset when they're dead. Because, like, that's a friend I don't get to see anymore. And I grieve. And part of my grieving process involves anger. I get angry. I will never tell someone not to. Yeah. And that's fine for you, right? That's your approach to life. Right? Which is fine, just as mine is fine. Right? That doesn't inform how the rest of us should live. Just like he is arguing that do not criminalize it. Right? He's arguing from his own point of view, right? And there is no right or wrong in the situation. Yeah. I'm saying, like, when I would argue for, right, you create suffering. Maybe. Blasphemous says, you have a good Muslim beard? My beard is not Muslim. My beard is atheist, thank you very much. No, wait. My beard is just dead hair. It doesn't have a religion or non-religion. Wouldn't that be for selfish reasons, though? Sure, yeah. Selfish reasons, indeed. Am I not allowed to have selfish reasons for stuff? Is that not okay for me to have emotions? To have a relationship to another, not over their life? But they have over my life. When they kill themselves, right, that is for their selfish reasons, and they cause suffering in my life. What? Why does it only go one way? Why doesn't it go both ways? Right? Why are they allowed to cause me suffering while I'm not allowed to cause them suffering for selfish reasons, right? Because I'm guessing that is the argument, right? That my selfish reasons will cause them suffering because they will, if I convince them to stay alive, then I cause them suffering by staying alive, right? But them, by not staying alive, is causing me suffering. That is their life that they have complete say over. Yeah, sure, they have agency, right? I cannot decide for them. That's their decision to make. Right? Like, I can tell someone, don't kill yourself, but that, I mean, that's just me saying that. Right? If they decide to do that anyway, right? What I said didn't matter, right? I can't control that. Unless, and I'm all for that, right? Unless we make it a criminal thing and we physically hinder people from doing it, which people do today, right? And I'm with you on that part, right? Taking people's agency away and calling them criminals, I wouldn't want to do that. Yeah, I would not want to do that. I would express my emotions, right? And say, I don't want you to kill yourself. And of course they have complete, they don't have complete say over it, they have agency. They have, I mean, as long as they have the tools. What is the least amount of tools you would need to kill yourself? You just go outside and look for a big body of water, right? As long as you have got freedom of movement, they have complete agency and the decision to make whatever they want. Yeah. Doesn't matter what I say. So why should I not say those things? You can be upset about it, but be able to respect their decision to do so. Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't have to respect the decision. Like, it doesn't matter, right? If I respect or don't respect their decision to do so, it doesn't matter from their point of view. Right? My suffering still happens because of what they did. Right? And if I don't know, maybe, can I convince someone to not kill themselves? Is it me causing them suffering, or did they themselves, right? Like you say, they had complete agency. They had the say over it. If I did not physically restrict them from killing themselves, but if I mentally manipulated them to stay alive, that's an interesting line. Also, right, it depends on what the rest of their life would look like. I've been suicidal in the past. I'm happy I didn't kill myself. Today I am happy about that. So I'm grateful for the people who said their piece in a way that made me not kill myself. What about that, right? We don't know, right? Maybe it would have been like a life full of suffering and I would just be bitter against these people. But we don't know, right? You don't know. You cannot know. It's in the future. But definitely, yeah, I can be able to respect their decision. And I can be able not to respect their decision in different situations. Did you really want to die, though? I mean, I did not no, I did not want to live anymore. There's a difference. Yeah. I believe, right, from what I've heard when I've talked to other people, I have no statistics on this. It's just my own anecdotal thing, that is more often the case, that you don't want to live anymore, rather than you want to die. So that, yeah. Subtle differences, but important differences. Many just want the suffering to end. Exactly. That is where I came from. And like, a lot of people are suicidal in depression and right? I think a lot of suicides come from that. Yeah. Not all of them, of course not. My guess would be 80%. 80% comes from that. Pulling stats out of my ass. Alright, I am rather of the opinion, says Schopenhauer, that the clergy should be challenged to state their authority for stamping from their pulpit or their writings as a crime, an act which has been committed by many people honored and loved by us, and refusing an honorable burial to those who have their own free will. That's not a thing. Alright, and refusing an honorable burial to those who have their own free will left the world. That. Yes. Fuck the church. Fuck you, clergy. Fuck you for being assholes. Because this I agree with, right? This is a dick move. Calling them criminals. And refusing... I don't know what an honorable burial is, but right. The burial, like... They shouldn't... Like, the clergy shouldn't have any say in this. The burials should be about the family, right? You honor the dead, right? You celebrate their life and maybe their death if you are so inclined, right? It's about family and friends, right? It's not about the clergy. It's about a ritual to say goodbye. And fuck them for doing that, I suppose. Banana Waffle Monkey says, sup sluts? Sup? Banana Waffle Monkey, how are you doing today? We are reading Schopenhauer on suicide. Some of the points are fine, others are a little bit subjective. Alright. They cannot produce any kind of biblical authority. Nay, they have no philosophical argument that are valid. That seems like rhetoric, right? I've already said that. I've seen this as a valid one. Where was it? He gave 2 examples, and I thought one of them was valid, even though I don't agree with it. I thought it was valid. Was it the cowardice thing? Well, that's not an argument. Yeah, that's not an argument. The madman thing, that's not an argument either. But I can imagine, right? There are arguments to hinder people from committing suicide, right? Because you cause suffering. And I think that is completely valid. And, like, I don't think he should be especially with the rhetorics that he's using, I don't think that he should be the presenter of these arguments, because he is definitely gonna strawman any arguments that he lifts out, because he don't see them as valid. But I would assume that there are valid arguments, because you can find valid arguments for everything. Maybe. Too long didn't read so far? Alright, he's saying that the church and people are just abhorred by suicide, and it should not be a crime. That's pretty much it. Yeah, we've only come this far, like in the first paragraph still. Yeah, he's talking about the religions taking control of the things, and I'm down with that. Fuck the religions for doing that. And he's doing the guillotine, my favorite guillotine, saying that it cannot be wrong and all this stuff. Alright, yeah, he pointed out that there is nowhere in the Bible or any of these texts anything about suicide being crime or immoral. Which, I mean, I'll take his word for it. I haven't read those books, so I'll take his word for it, but I would also assume that there are religious people that say that all life is sacred and taking any life is... Right? They could make that argument, right? From a biblical point of view, which wouldn't convince me, but Right? That would be a biblical authority, right? So he's a little bit sneaky in his language and his... Right, and it is reasons that we want. That you want. Mere empty phrases or words of abuse we cannot accept. Who are these we? Yeah, he's doing that a lot. He's talking about we for stuff that I don't agree with. The criminal law forbids suicide, which is fucked up, yeah. That is not a reason that holds good in the church. Yes. That is never. Just because something is the law is never an argument. Right? Saying something should be illegal just because it is the law is so dumb, right? So I agree with this. And I would suppose that since people do it nowadays, do that argument, I suppose that they did it that day as well. It's the law, therefore it should be illegal. That's such a dumb argument. Oh, alright. Moreover, it is extremely ridiculous for what punishment... yeah, what punishment can frighten those who seek death? Well, that's a failure of imagination. Also, I think the idea of punishments have... yeah. Punishments and vengeance, right? Also, he was actually talking about punishments before, right? You get an dishonorable funeral, and they take all your possessions, so the people who outlive you don't get to keep your stuff, because the church or the state just takes a hold of that. And that could frighten some people, right? Not leaving something behind for the people they care about. Also, if you fail, then you can get torture as punishment, right? There's, yeah, failure of imagination. But I get the point, right? He's thinking very much in black and white, right? What are you gonna do? Kill him? I mean, no, that's not it. When a man is punished for trying to commit suicide, it is his clumsy failure that is punished. Oh, yeah. I mean, sure, but also no. That makes sense? Sure, but also, yeah, failure of imagination. The ancients were also very far from looking at the matter in this light. It makes sense to me, right? It makes sense if we look, like he's talking about the ancients, that's talking about evolutionary, right? And if we take an evolutionary standpoint on suicide, it makes a lot of sense that societies would evolve to abhor suicide. And like wanting people to stay alive as long as possible to a fault. Right? And that we do that, right? We want people to stay alive as long as possible to a fault. In my mind, anyway. Alright. Pliny says, Vitam... Alright, right. Sure. I'm not gonna read that. Etc. Alright. Someone said something in Latin or whatever. I'm not reading that. Sorry. It's way too long. Actually, now that we have you here, Blasphemous, do you know what this means? Nigo ac pernego. Latin, maybe? Umst? Fuck. My apologies, Banana Waffle Monkey. My apologies. Yeah. I meant you, Banana Waffle Monkey. My apologies indeed. Fuck. Blasphemous says he's talking to you. Yeah, I was talking to you, Banana Wolf Monkey. Ac means and. O implies the first person singular verb. Alright, so this. Deny. All right. It's just an exclamation, right? This is the operative thing. It's an exclamation. Right. What are you doing? Something like that. All right. That's fine. All right. In Massilia and on the island of Ceos, a hemlock potion was offered in public by the magistrate to those who could give valid reasons for quitting this life. Yeah, I'm all for that. Right? We've talked about that before. I would want to see, like, I don't know, a grace period, a buffer period. We were just arbitrarily saying 3 weeks where you would have to talk to some professionals, right? Then offer a hemlock potion or something even better, something that just makes you fall asleep instead of doing all these painful ways that people go. Yeah, it's better to just take a pill, fall asleep. That would be the best. Van Wolfmonkey says, Socrates, Lamau. Oh, never mind. You're on your own with the Greek. Oh, yeah. A peaceful pill? Yeah, sure, peaceful pill, if you want to call it that. It doesn't matter. Just a pill that makes you fall asleep and then you never fucking wake up. There's gotta be possible to do a cocktail like that. I read that book. Wait. There's a book called A Peaceful Pill? I'm assuming that it is about that. And how many heroes and wise men of ancient times have not ended their lives by voluntary death? And he's using that as an argument. This is like the third time? The second or third time, just a lot of people kill themselves. Therefore, we should be happy about it? Like, the consequence of the argument doesn't really... I mean, I suppose it should not be illegal, which is... Actually, yeah, I can get behind that. If a lot of people does one thing, then maybe that thing... But yeah, the numbers would have to be way higher for that argument to take hold in me. Like pirating. Peaceful Pill Handbook. Oh, it's a cookbook for making that pill that just makes you fall asleep. To be sure, Aristotle says suicide is wrong against the state, although not against the person. Wait, why is it wrong against the state? Because they have to bury you? Wait, I don't get that. I would say it's the other way around. I mean, not against the person who commits the suicide, but for the people around, right? Family and possible friends. Right? Cause them suffering. What about the state? How is the state... Why would the state be involved? I don't get it. It did not, like, the word doesn't stand by themselves. Blasphemous. He is saying, oh look, sane people decided to die and it wasn't crime back then until these religions started saying it was. Of course, yeah. That's how he started out, like the Abrahamic religions, the monotheistic religions. Those were the ones. He was talking about. Right. I forgot about that part. Thanks, Blasphemous. Stabus, however, in his treatise on the Peripatietic ethics, I don't know what that is, uses this sentence. Oh, all right. Sure, okay. Interesting, yes. And similarly, okay, yes. Oh, I understand. Very interesting. That makes a lot of sense, yeah. Alright, and we find that suicide was actually praised by the Stoics as a noble and heroic act. Oh, that. This is corroborated by hundreds of passages and especially in the works of Seneca. I didn't know that. I kind of enjoyed this. I did kind of enjoy the Stoics. What's the argument, right? Again, like, just like with this quote, like, he's doing that thing we were saying that you're not supposed to do. Just because someone famous says it, therefore it's true, right? He's not actually presenting the argument. He's just saying that they praised it as noble and heroic. Wait, why? Why is it noble and heroic? And this is non-sentence. He's doing that exact thing. Just because they're famous, therefore it's all good. Blasphemous says, now that the Stoics said it, I can get behind it, Kappa. Exactly, right? Banana Wafflemuck says, back when everyone was their own Tower of Babel, Lamau. Wait. Everyone was their own Tower of Babel? What does that mean? Further, it is well known that Hindus often look upon suicide as a religious act, as for instance the self-sacrifice of widows throwing themselves under the wheels of the chariot of the god at Juggernaut, or giving oneself to the crocodiles in the Ganges, or casting oneself in the holy tanks in the temples, and so on. Yeah, I've heard about that, and that's like, yeah, they do that, and that's fucking dumb. Yeah, that's fucking dumb. This tradition? That's so fucked up. That's so fucking sexist, right? The widows, right? It's always the women, right? If the man dies, oh well, the woman has to die as well. Fucked up. Lemao. 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 Laughing my ass off. Alright, yeah. Too long didn't read. Reference means they spoke a bunch of languages. Ah, their own Tower of Babel. I do that. I have that trouble. Like, when I speak Swedish, I intermingle... Not like this. Yeah, not like this. Like the Greek and but I intermingle a lot of English words. Right, when I'm like... I just end up in that situation in Swedish where I'm like... What the fuck is that called in Swedish again? I don't fucking remember, so I've just embraced it and started like intermingling English within language. I mean, I don't like it, but there it is. Lazy fucker. Nana Wafflemonkey says, hence the Babelfish from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that you put in your ear and understand every language. Code switching? Code switching? What do you mean? No, I'm almost bilingual. Not really, but like on the cusp of being bilingual. Waffle Monkey +1. It just defined code, not code switching. Can't take two words, unfortunately. It only takes one word. Shh, don't tell anyone.
It's the deep breath before the plunge.
Yeah, Babelfish caused more wars than any other invention, well, any other thing in the entire universe. When Cider uses bash inside Python. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, right? That's code switching. Alright, let's see here. Code switching. I don't think that's it. In linguistics, code switching or language alternation occurs when a speaker alternates between two or more languages or language varieties in the context of a single conversation or situation. No, that's not quite it. We did have that once. I remember I had me and a friend when we lived in Ireland. It was a Swedish friend. We did this. I remember one time we were just hanging out and just talking bullshit, and then like we had been alone for like 2 hours, and it's like, why are we speaking in English again? He looked around and it's like, I don't fucking know. Let's stop doing that. So that happens, right? When some of your friends speak Swedish and some of your friends do not. Then code switching becomes a thing. But no, like it's more when I speak Swedish and I speak and there is like a word or some concept that I don't remember what it's called in Swedish. I just use the English words to not lose the flow. So it's not maybe a little bit of code switching. I don't know. Multilinguals. Like I'm not a multilingual. Not really. I'm close to, but no. Speakers of more than one language. There is actually, that's an interesting neuroscience thing, right? If you teach 2 languages to young children, the 2 languages becomes intertwined, right? It's just one language kind of to them. That's my understanding of multilingual, bilingual or whatever, that they all get. But for people like me who started learning a little bit early, and I'm a little bit older in childhood, right? Then you have one language and the second language ends up on next to it, like physically next to it in the brain. They're not there are some intertwining stuff, right? But they are separate, kinda. Blasphemuses. When you teach 2 languages to Carl Jung's children. Wait, did someone teach 2 languages to his children? Did not get that reference at all. Where are we at? There's Schopenhauer. Alright, here we go. It is the same on the stage, that mirror of life. Yeah, he has to point that out. It's a mirror of life, which this argument falls flat, right? Him having to point that out, right? You can cherry pick anything, right? If you pick art as a mirror of life, then sure, maybe. If he keeps on doing that thing that just because someone said it, therefore it is so, then I'm not buying it. The words have to stand on their own. Right. For instance, the famous Chinese play, Chinese, and then it's a French name. Almost all the noble characters end by suicide, without indicating anywhere or it's striking the spectator that they were committed a crime. Yeah, he's just saying because in some places, yeah, I don't like this. Like, most, like, all of, yeah, this whole thing. Right, from, yeah, all this has been nonsense in my mind. He's just doing that argument. Someone famous had this attitude. Maybe they didn't even have that attitude. That was his interpretation of their attitude. Like, it doesn't give any arguments whatsoever. He's just saying, oh, this dude said so. Ugh. Evac Oni-chan says, hi bro, how's it going? Hello Evac Oni-chan. I don't recognize your name. So, it's nice to meet you. It's going fine. We're talking, we're reading Schopenhauer about suicide. On suicide, yeah. And he's not doing the best of jobs to convince me anyway. Well, he's trying to convince me that it shouldn't be a crime and that I don't need convincing of. So I'm just I'm nitpicking. That is what I'm doing. That's what I'm good at. I'm good at nitpicking. So I'm nitpicking, yeah. Blasphemous says, I was mishearing what you just said. Oh, no. Young children, like, small children. Like, when you start teaching children language, like 1, 2, 3, 4 years old. If you teach them 2 languages, they become intertwined in the brain. They become like one language. That's true multilingual or true bilingual in my mind. Blasphemous continues. Cider just reads and shouts this. This is wrong a second later. Shout? Do I shout? Oh man, maybe I should lower my volume. Sorry, I didn't mean to shout. My apologies, I hope I didn't hurt your ears. Ivak Oni-chan says, that's good to hear, bro. Nice. It's nice. So how are you doing, Ivak Oni-chan? Do you think suicide should be a crime? At the bottom, it is the same on our own stage. For instance, in Hamlet's monologue, the meditation of a criminal. Wait, is Hamlet's monologue the meditation of a criminal? He merely states that... Oh, here we go. Here's an actual argument, maybe. He merely states that considering the nature of the world, death would be certainly preferable. Huh. If we were sure that by it we should be annihilated. Yeah, that's one attitude to have, I suppose. It's that same, right? I started out by actually doing that same thing, right? To live is a mountain, to die is a feather. But there lies the rub. There lies the rub, alright. But the reasons brought to bear against suicide by the priests of the monotheistic, that is of Jewish, Abrahamic religions, and by those philosophers who adapt themselves to it, are weak sophisms, easily contradicted. Alright. This is the third time he says that they are weak, they have weak philosophy, but he does not respond to it. Right? He does not respond, he just says that it is weak and they have no reasons. That is all he says. He just repeats that over and over again, and we should just take his word for it. Plausible but fallacious argument. Exactly what I accused him of doing, right? Nice. I think this is my favorite new philosopher. Just because the guillotine, yeah. Hume has furnished the most thorough refutation of them in his essay on suicide. Oh, we can read some Hume. Which did not appear until after his death, and was immediately suppressed by the shameful bigotry and gross ecclesiastical tyranny existing in England. Alright. Hence only a very few copies of it were sold secretly, and those at a dear price. And for this and another treatise of the great man, we are indebted to reprint and publish at Basel. Again, not repeating any of the arguments, which makes this like, Hume said it, therefore it must be so. I don't buy that. That's because you're not piecing it all together. You read one thing and then shout that it is wrong, and then you're not paying attention to the context. I mean, the context, right? I actually disagree with that statement, right? The context is that he's arguing for it should not be criminal, right? And that I'm already convinced by from my own arguments. Some of his arguments for it, right? Some of his this is supposed to be an argumentative text, no? That's his whole premise, like his whole idea is to say that suicide should no longer be criminal. And I'm nitpicking, right? I'm nitpicking that a lot of what he does are just fancy rhetorics, right? He doesn't actually make any good arguments for his case. Right? His argument is, like, that is literally his argument if we take a look at the context of this paragraph. The context of this paragraph, he's just listing, right? He's making a list of a lot of people who does not treat it as a crime. that's not an argument. That's exactly what we said in the beginning, because someone famous said so. That's this whole thing. This whole paragraph is meaningless from that point of view, right? And if you agree that just because some famous person said so is not a valid argument, then so far this has all been nonsense and useless. Because there are no arguments, it's just they said so. Right? That is the context. No? What am I missing? Is Hamlet's monologue? Nope. But I haven't read Hamlet's monologue, right? He's assuming, well, I suppose it kind of makes sense if you have read all these things. If you have read all these things, if you have read Hamlet's monologue, you have heard the argument. But I haven't. So for me, it is nonsense. And, like, is he telling me that I have to translate and understand all this? Do I have to see all these plays? Do I have to see Hamlet? I don't think so. Right? And if that is the case, his words are not standing on their own, which again makes them not valuable to me. Think back to the beginning. Yeah, the beginning, right? As far as I can see, right? Monotheistic. Like, these people say that it should be a crime. And these people don't say it. What do you mean? Actually, now that you point it out, he did not really argue these things either. He's just listing what people are saying, right? Yeah. They are saying that it's the greatest cowardice, only possible by a madman, or other absurdities. He's not listing any arguments here either. He's just saying that is what they are saying. That it is wrong. That, I mean, this is, right, again, right, you kind of assumes that you have read Hume, and that you agree with Hume's guillotine, right? That is what he's doing here. Which I fell for, right? I fell for that fancy rhetorics. Just because I've read Hume? Hamlet's monologue is the to be or not to be one. Yeah, I don't remember that. I mean, I've heard the to be or not to be thing, but I don't remember the actual monologue. I mean, I've seen a movie, and I know I've seen it, but I don't remember the arguments within it. Yeah. Like, what I see is a man whose purpose is to decriminalize suicide, which I think is a worthy goal. I've said that over and over again. I think it's a worthy goal. I just think he's not doing a very good job for arguing for the decriminalization. This does not convince me. So I still don't know what you mean by the context. There lies the... Alright. The reasons brought... Weak sophisms, easy contradicted. Oh, here we go. Maybe this is what we're talking about? This reference here. I haven't looked at any of the references. See my treatise on the foundations of morals, right? This is what we got to read, I suppose. I am repeating myself if I have to say it. Alright, then I suppose don't say it. I completely disagree with what you said. I think I'm reading this in context, and I'm nitpicking. Yeah. Hume has furnished the most thorough refutation of them in his essay on suicide. which did not appear until after his death. Wait, no, we did read that already. Dear Price, and for this and another treatise of the great man, we are indebted to a reprint published at Bale. Alright, here we go. That a purely philosophical treatise originating from one of the greatest thinkers and writers of England, who refuted with cold reason and current arguments against suicide, must steal about in that country as if it were a fraudulent piece of work until it found protection in a foreign country. It's a great disgrace to the English nation. Blasphemous says he believes that how suicide has become stigmatized is because of Abrahamic religions, and if it wasn't for them, people may have very different view on it. Alright, so what I'm doing is not, right? I'm misunderstanding his purpose of the text. That is what you're saying. It's not that I'm not paying attention to the context, it is that I misunderstood the context. Right? His idea is not to argue to decriminalize. That was my reading into it. He is not arguing for that. That is what you're saying. He is just looking at... He's just writing a text that claims that people will have different attitudes in different cultures. So it's not really about suicide, it's just about different cultures having different views on different things. And suicide is just an example, so it's not really about suicide, is it? Which is a terrible name for this thing. Yes, maybe that is what you wanted it to be about. I think that's very unfair of me. It is called On Suicide. And he's specifically talking about it as a crime. I think, sure, maybe it's a misunderstanding, but it's my reading of the thing, right? Right? And he's talking smack, right? He's talking smack about the people, right? The madman, the cowardice. He's talking smack about all these people. So I think I disagree. I think my reading of it, my interpretation of this text, is that he's trying to argue, right? That the purpose of this text is to be a stepping stone towards decriminalizing. Yeah, I'm actually sticking to that interpretation. Yeah. I'm sticking to that interpretation. Why else would he talk smack on all the Jewish Abrahamic religions and then talk nicely about all these other people, right? What other would be the purpose of this text? Right? Especially with this name. So yeah, I disagree with your interpretation. He stated that it would be about in the very first sentence. Yeah, well, as far as I can see, it is only the followers of monotheistic, that is Jewish religions, that regard suicide as a crime. Right? It depends on how you interpret the sentence. What is it about? Is it about suicide as a crime, or is it about only monotheistic Jewish religions? And I think my interpretation is valid because of the title of the thing, On Suicide. So this sentence, in my interpretation, is suicide as a crime. That is the operative thing that happens in this sentence. For me, when I read it, right? That is my interpretation. Another possible interpretation, which I'm not refuting, I'm just... It doesn't work for me to interpret that this is a piece on culture and monotheistic religions because of its name and because of this sentence. Like, even without the name, I would probably see this as the operative, right? Because it's all about suicide. But there's a grander context here that I might be missing, right? Because we're only reading this thing. We're only reading this thing at the moment. I didn't read this thing or any of the other. I haven't read Schopenhauer before. Maybe it's an argument against the monotheistic. Maybe this is just his atheist argument for separation of church and state. That might be the context, but I don't know anything of that context. I only have this context, and from this, that is what I interpret. That is what I see when I read it. Yeah. Blasphemous says, on suicide is very broad. You can't make a judgment of what it would be able by those two words. I can make a judgment to say that, well, this text is going to be about suicide. Right? I think it's fair for me to make that assumption, that this text is going to be on suicide. And you claiming otherwise is kind of weird, right? Oh, on suicide. Oh, I know. This is about culture. This is about monotheistic religions. Yeah, I think that's a stretch. I mean, there might, as I said, there might be a grander context here that I'm missing out on. But since I haven't read that context, I can't really... I don't know. But I suppose if you take that interpretation that this is an argument against, like, for the separation of church and state, if you read it as such, it does make a lot more sense now that, like, these lists, right, and him talking smack about those religions, and he's talking well about these people, right? He's talking well about Hume and Shakespeare and whatever. Yeah, that's an appeal to emotion, right? He's doing an appeal to emotion. Look at all these great artists and great philosophers. What do they all have in common, right? They don't follow these dumb religions. Yeah. I would say that both interpretations are valid. Yeah. And from my point of view, I'm doing the other one. Yeah. Blasphemous says, I have no idea how you got that from those two words. Wait, on suicide? You have no idea how I got the idea that the text was going to be about suicide from those two words as the title? How? On suicide. Like, it's one of the two words. Like, there are only two words. One of them is suicide. The other one is on, which is an archaic way to write it, but that it's like the modern equivalence of that would be about suicide. That would be the title of this text in a more modern term, right? About suicide. On suicide. Are you trolling me, Blasphemous? That you have no idea how I got that from those two words? You must be trolling me, right? Of course it would be about suicide, but you made a judgment about what specifically it would be about when it pertains to suicide. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that was my interpretation. Right? Which I think is a valid interpretation. I still do, right? Banana Waffle Monkey says, authority? Yeah, it's my interpretation. I think my interpretation is just fine. I think your interpretation is just fine as well. And again, like, yeah, authority. Who has the authority? Alright. At the same time, it shows what a good conscience the church has on a question of this kind. The only valid moral reason against suicide has been explained by my chief work. There we go. It kind of assumes that we have read his chief work, which is actually... It is this. Here we go. Here we get an actual argument. That is what interests me, right? The arguments. It is this, that suicide prevents the attainment of the highest moral aim, since it substitutes a real release from this world of misery for one that is merely apparent. I don't understand this argument. Prevents the attainment of the highest moral aim. But he is okay with... And he has alluded, he didn't say it straight out, but he had the idea that... Like, he was talking about Hume, right? And kind of alluded to Hume's guillotine. So what is the highest moral aim? Isn't that for each one to decide, right? For an anti-natalist, the highest moral aim might be suicide, right? So that kind of falls apart, doesn't it? Since it substitutes a real release from this world of misery of one that is merely apparent. What does that mean? I mean, you release from this world for one. What does he know that I don't know? Oh, it's just in your imagination, right? You go to heaven, or you get reborn, or whatever. It's merely apparent. Ah. He's arguing that you have to be alive to be a moral agent. To continue to be a moral agent, you have to be alive. And by committing suicide, you can no longer be a moral agent. And you cannot improve on your morality. You cannot reach any higher. I mean, this is what interests me, right? This is an actual argument on the topic at hand. Which I've never heard before. Like, this is news to me. Like, all of this was just... Yeah, I did not find that interesting. And that's my interpretation, and I think, yeah, that's fine. But this one, though... I mean, I would not internalize this, I don't think. But yeah, to be a moral agent, you need to be alive, right? Again, this is my interpretation of what he's saying. Right, but there is a very great difference between a mistake and a crime. And it is as a crime that the Christian clergy wish to stamp it. I mean, I would say that not everybody would agree that it is a mistake. But it might be, yeah. Christianity's inmost truth is that suffering, the cross, is the real purpose of life. Hence it condemns suicide as thwarting this end, while the ancients from a lower point of view approved of it, nay, honor it. Isn't this a straw man? Is that really Christianity's thing, like as a whole? I've never seen Christianity from that light before. Suffering is the purpose of life. That's the only reason we live. That would actually explain a lot. But it has changed. It is not that anymore, right? The inmost truth. There's a lot of helping people nowadays in Christianity, I think. Blasphemous says, yes, so you can go to heaven. Oh, of course, yeah. You do all this suffering. It's a test. But they still they still say God is good. What is so good about this? Right? Isn't that... Does that really work together? Right? Praise God. Like I love making that argument, right? That God is the villain, the antagonist. Because this is it. God is the antagonist, but like since it is God, you have no choice, right? You have no choice. God is an antagonist, but you have no choice and do whatever he wishes. But if you make that argument, like I've pissed off a lot of religious people by saying that, right? That God is the antagonist. Alright. Blasphemous quotes. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who's rich to enter the kingdom of God. Ooh, I've heard that before. Don't know where it's from. Someone is rich to enter? Oh, right. Because of, well, to paraphrase, what's he called? Dr. K. Suffering, like, there is no gatekeeping. Just because you're rich does not mean you cannot suffer. So, right. Everybody suffers, even the rich, no? It's a famous line. It is from the Bible. There we go. It is from the Bible. Famous line. Blasphemous is telling people that they should suffer to be rewarded later sounds like a means of control. Yes. And I've heard, like, I haven't studied history, but I have heard that, like, there were, when it was written, parts of the pieces that were written were specifically about controlling people. It was written with that purpose. Banana Waffle Monkey says, of course the Abrahamic religions value suffering. Have you seen how long their church's services are? Yeah, not only that. Yeah, and they're boring, right? They're not only long, they're boring.
Breath, settle down and think straight.
Huh. That's interesting. It feels like the modernized versions, though, they don't say it out loud, do they? Blasphemous says, and all you get is a tiny cracker and a thimble worth of grape juice at the end. Oh, man. Alright. Yeah, the cross. My cross to bear and all of that. Well, I'm no pure hedonist myself, but so I can probably see, like, accepting suffering as part of life. I can see value in that. But I don't know. I haven't read the Bible in a long time. I don't know if that's it, right? But I'm thinking that is, right? Suffering is part of life. And by embracing life, you also embrace suffering. Not to be rewarded. Right? It's not about being rewarded. The suffering itself. But I love this. Condemn suicide as thwarting this end. Actually, if that is all life is about, then yeah, thwart this end. That's, I mean, from that point of view, right? Suicide makes a lot of sense from this point of view. Right? Getting one up on God, right? Fuck you, God. I'm out. well, that assumes no afterlife, so that doesn't work. It was just my mind assuming no afterlife, then yeah. Then it is thwarting. Right? If you live from a point of view, right? If you live that, if this is your truth, that it's not only apparent, but that it's the actual what you think will happen, then it doesn't really, then you're not really thwarting God, are you? Right? The Christian would say it's not about condemn it as thwarting this end. Maybe the Christian would argue, well, you will just get more suffering. You're just hurting yourself. Right? Could be a Christian defense for this, right? Seems like Schopenhauer is quite the atheist, though. Maybe. This argument against suicide is nevertheless ascetic. Person who renounces material comforts and leads a life of austere self-discipline. Ascetic. Oops. Alright, and only holds good from a much higher ethical standpoint that has ever been taken by moral philosophers of Europe. Much higher ethical standpoint. What does he mean by higher ethical standpoint? I didn't get that point. Silent Sea? Wait, Silent Sea? Ascetic? No. Where was it again? Ascetic? Ascetic. There we go. Thanks. I'm never gonna remember that. I'm not even gonna remember what that word means. I've already forgotten. What was it again? Person who renounces material comforts. Alright. It's anti-materialistic. No one rich can get into heaven. No, it's hard for the rich to get into heaven. Alright. Against suicide is ascetic and only holds good from a much higher ethical standpoint. I don't... I didn't get that point. It seems like he's not literal here, right? He's poking fun. He's like, this is sarcasm. Yeah, this must be sarcastic, right? He's making fun of it. But if we come down from that very high standpoint, yeah, get off your high horse. There is no longer a valid moral reason for condemning suicide. The extraordinary active zeal with which the clergy of the monotheistic religions attack suicide is not supported either by the Bible or by any valid reasons. He makes this statement again, right? He assumes that we already agree with him on this point. So it looks as if their zeal must be instigated by some secret motive. May it not be that the voluntary sacrificing, of one's life is a poor compliment to him who said, well, thank you very much. Wait. In my treatise of the morals, for him who said, wait, fuck, where did we go? For him who said, here we go. In that case, it would be another example of the gross optimism of these religions denouncing suicide in order to avoid being denounced by it. The word renounces is Material C, and thus it is silence. Define ascetic. Pertaining to a characteristic of an ascetic or the practice of rigorous self-discipline. Okay, thank you for defining the word with the word. Exactly. They do that from time to time. But they do, like, practice of rigorous self-discipline. I mean, it could have been worse, blasphemous, right? Could have been worse. Someone who practices self-denial as spiritual discipline. Abstainer. Actually, I'm not, right? I'm not against ascetics. Yeah, not at all. Right? I'm not a hedonist. Don't do too many drugs. Don't become an addict. Don't... Actually, speaking of, how is the not smoking going? You still clean? Right? You were quitting, right, Banana Waffle Monkey? I don't misremember that. Yeah. Nice. Good job. Good job indeed. Funny enough, it's the caffeine I get cravings for. Oh, that's not too shabby. Alright, both caffeine and nicotine. Oh, we talked about that yesterday. No, yeah, we talked about addictions. No, that was not yesterday. It was the day before yesterday. The different people have different types of addictions. Right? That's historically, like in my history, most of my addictions have been escapist. Kind of. Well, if you were an addict, you would more like... Yeah, I would more go the psychedelic and weed smoking route, so to speak. The downer route. Well, maybe you would have gone the upper with the crack and the... What's it called? The cocaine. That kind of addiction. If you became an addict. It's just an idea. Addictions can be different. And based on deeper problems, right? In that case, would it be another example of the gross optimism of these religious denouncing suicide in order to avoid being denounced by it? Oh, man, this is so frustrating. Right, this point here is kind of in favor of blasphemous interpretation, isn't it? It's about denouncing religions. Yep, this is about denouncing religions. It is indeed. As a rule, it will be found that as soon as the terrors of life outweigh the terrors of death, a man will put an end to his life. That is one way, right? But that's just one possible reason. This is the most obvious one, right? The one I took as well, with the cancer and the year of sickness. The resistance of the terrors of death is, however, considerable. They are indeed. They stand like a sentinel at the gate that leads out of life. They do. And that makes a lot of sense from an evolutionary standpoint, right? The people who are very afraid of death, or really don't want death, are the one who's gonna survive, like, species-wide. DNA-wide, right? It's hard-coded into us to not want to die. And, right, yeah, kind of overcome that, yeah. Perhaps there is no one living who would not have already put an end to his life if this end has been something that was purely negative, a sudden cessation of existence. Wait, what is purely negative? A sudden cessation of existence. Perhaps there is no living man who would not have already put an end to his life if this end has been something that was purely negative. I didn't understand this bit. But there is something positive about it, right? A sudden cessation of existence, isn't that positive? Isn't that what he just said? That this is a positive, a sudden cessation of existence, like you stop to exist? And that's it, you're just dead and done, it's over. Wouldn't that be a positive? But there is something positive about it, namely the destruction of the body. Why is that positive? And this alarms a man simply because his body is the manifestation of the will to live. Destruction of the body, and this alarms a man simply because his body is the manifestation of the will to live. That sounds weird. Blasphemous. That short essay became quite long. I must go to sleep. Oh wow, it became very long. Alright, we almost got through it. I'm still gonna get through it before lunch. But thanks for hanging out, and thanks for the tip, Blasphemous. I've enjoyed this essay. And I'm gonna enjoy the end. But yeah, go to sleep, and thanks for hanging out, and sleep well, and see you next time, yeah. What's my this is ban him to sleep. You're banished to sleep, Blasphemous. That is it. I like that word much better. Banish, rather than just the shortened version. Ban. It seems... Banish seems more severe and strong, so yeah. Banish, we banish you to sleep. Right. Meanwhile, the fight, as a rule with these sentinels, is not so hard as it might appear from a distance. Well, if you are not at a distance, right, it's difficult from that distance. And he's invalidating someone else's experience again, right? Since for him it is not that hard, for someone at that distance, he's saying that it's not hard for them as well, which is weird. In consequence, it is true of the antagonism between mental and physical suffering. For instance, if we suffer very great bodily pain, or if the pain lasts for a long time, we become indifferent to all other troubles. Yeah, our recovery is what we desire most dearly. Yes, indeed. In the same way, great mental suffering makes us insensible to bodily suffering. We despise it. That doesn't work out for me. It is just that the mental pain is... Right? It becomes the same thing. It's the only thing you care about, right? It's not about despising physical suffering. Well, for some people, I guess. Not for me. Nay, if it outweighs the other, we find it a beneficial distraction, a pause of our mental suffering. Oh, that's why people do the cutting thing, right? I haven't done that. I don't like pain. I'm overly sensitive to physical pain and emotional pain. Yeah, I'm very neurotic. Very neurotic. I don't like physical pain. I don't like mental pain. It cannot... the physical pain, sure, it distracts me, but it hurts nonetheless. Too sensitive, yeah. And so it is that suicide becomes easy, for the bodily pain that is bound up with it loses all importance in the eye of one who is tormented by excessive mental suffering. That is interesting, because he's saying that is very an interesting distinction between the two, right? Because mental suffering leads to, oh, the only way out is suicide, while physical suffering, you start to, like, the only way out, well, in the end, right? If your logic comes to that conclusion, right? That it's only physical suffering left, right? The only way out is suicide, I suppose. So that could end up in both situations. When the pain gets grand enough, the terrors of life outweighs the terrors of death. That might happen. This is particularly obvious in the case of those who are driven to commit suicide through some purely morbid and discordant feeling. And that is, right, that's a lot of where the abhorrence comes from, right? We dislike because physical pain passes. Mental pain passes. You can get better. You can get healthier. Recovery is what we desire. For not only ourselves, but for others. When they suffer mental pain, we want them recovery. We don't want their death. Right? Well, some people might want their deaths, right? Probably blasphemous would argue for their death. Well, I would argue for their recovery. Oh, that's why he didn't like when I did the cancer argument, right? That it doesn't take a madman. There are other reasons than these for suicide, I suppose. Ethical reasons, for example. But then this whole thing falls... That's a different question, right? That's not what we're talking about here. But I get why he tried to stop me from using that argument, because it was obvious. Alright. Morbid and discordant feeling. They have no feelings to overcome. They do not need to rush at it, but as soon as the keeper who looks after them leaves for 2 minutes, they quickly put an end to their life. When in some horrid and frightful dream we reach the highest pitch of terror, it awakens us, scattering all the monsters of the night. The same thing happens in the dream of life, when the greatest degree of terror compels us to break it off. I don't know. Suicide may also be looked upon as an experiment, as a question which man puts to nature and compels her to answer. It asks, what change a man's existence and knowledge of things experienced through death? It is an awkward experiment to make, for it destroys the very consciousness that avoids the answer. Nice. That was a nice ending. Actually, and I would say... Well, this ending was interesting, right? It doesn't really lend itself to either... It doesn't lend itself to either my interpretation or Blasphemous' interpretation. This is just... side notes. Yeah, it feels like a side note. It's not an ending, it's not an oomph ending. It's like... Huh. This is an interesting idea. I couldn't fit it anywhere else, but I did want to type it out. Which it is. It's ironic. There we go. Alright, so there were no Path of Exile today. Unfortunate. But I'm thinking probably Path of Exile most of the day tomorrow. Yeah. Most of it. Alright. That took a while. 2 hours for a short essay. Nice. Alright, so thanks for hanging out. Oh, peace times 2, yeah. See you next time, Banana Wolf Monkey. Have a good time, and I'll try and banish you to sleep as well. There we go. And see you next time. Cheers.